This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Built to fight, born to love. It's Ferdinand, and this film is lit. Hello, and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books and sometimes children's books. We have a nice, a little bit of a shorter episode than some of our more recent ones, which tends to be the case when we do children's books because, you know, the movies are shorter.
The books are way shorter.
Books are way shorter. It's not that there's not as much meat on the bones, but there's definitely a little bit less, you know, thematic, nuanced breaking down to be done. You know, we're not going to have quite as many heavy, big. Who knows? We may get into some interesting discussions in this one, but because it was a fun little movie. But we're going to get into first our summary. So if you have not read the story of Ferdinand or seen the 2017 film Ferdinand, we're going to catch you up in Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
All right, the story of Ferdinand, the book. Ferdinand is a sweet young bull who doesn't like to roughhouse like all the other bulls do. He prefers to sit and smell the flowers. He grows up to be very large, but he still doesn't have any interest in fighting. One day, all of the other bulls are excited about the prospect of being chosen to compete in the bullfights. Ferdinand doesn't care, so he goes off to hang out under his favorite tree. However, a bee sting causes him to momentarily act like all the other bulls, kicking and snorting. The men think that he'll be the perfect fighter, so they take him away to the fights. Once there, Ferdinand smells the flowers that the ladies in the crowd are wearing. He sits down in the middle of the arena and won't fight with the matador. Since he won't fight, they send him back home, and he lives out the rest of his days happy and in peace.
All right, and if you have not seen the film, here is roughly what happened. I sourced most of this from the Wikipedia plot summary. Ferdinand, a young bull growing up on a bullfighting farm in Spain, Casa del Toro, I believe is the name of it, is a pacifist who loves flowers and because of this is teased by the other bulls on the farm. After Ferdinand's father is taken to fight in the arena, but doesn't return as he promised he would, one of the older bulls tells him soft bulls always die. Ferdinand knows that he is this quote-unquote soft bull and decides he needs to run away and escapes to a flower farm where he is adopted by a young girl named Nina. Ferdinand grows there over the next couple of years into a gigantic strong bull who remains gentle at heart. After a bee sting causes him to lose control in the town square, he is recaptured and taken to Casa del Toro, the farm where he grew up, where he reunites with his old bullies, Valiente, Bones, and Guapo, plus a few new additions to the farm, Lupe the calming goat, and two new bulls, Angus and Machina. The next day, El Primero, the greatest bullfighter in a generation, arrives at the farm to select the bull for his final bullfight before retirement. Ferdinand refuses to take part in the fight to select the next bull, but an unfortunate string of events results in Guapo being sent to the slaughterhouse. Over the next few days, through acts of kindness, Ferdinand is able to slowly befriend the rest of the bulls apart from Valiente, and then during an escape attempt through the house, Ferdinand discovers a wall of horns in a trophy room, including his father's, and realizes that the myth of the bulls quote-unquote winning a bullfight was in fact a lie, and that all of the bulls die regardless of the outcome. Ferdinand tries to warn the others, but Valiente refuses to believe him, which leads to a fight where Valiente's horn is broken and then he is sent to the slaughterhouse. Upon seeing the fight, El Primero selects Ferdinand as the bull to fight in his final bullfighting arena, whatever they're called. I don't know. They got to have a name that I don't know. Ferdinand rescues Valiente and Guapo from the slaughterhouse, and together with the rest of the bulls and some plucky hedgehogs, they flee to Madrid. At a train station, Ferdinand is able to get the rest of the animals onto a train cart to escape to Nina's farm, but as a result is captured and taken to Las Ventas Arena to fight El Primero. Ferdinand accidentally humiliates El Primero during this fight in front of the crowd before Primero manages to injure him. In a bout of rage after being injured, Ferdinand is about to retaliate, but sees a carnation trampled under his hoof and is reminded of his true pacifist nature. He sits down and waits for El Primero to kill him, but the crowd, now enamored with Ferdinand, calls for him to be spared. Ferdinand, which El Primero does. Ferdinand survives the bullfight, is reunited with Nina, and the rest of the bulls move to Nina's farm upstate where they live happily ever after. The end. That is the summary for Ferdinand. I have a few questions. Let's get into them we don't have Gustu because it's a
picture book.
Occasionally we do, but very rarely for kids' picture books do we have like a guess who. So we did discuss trying to figure out a way to do like just show the picture and be like who. But I feel like it would, in this one in particular, would be very obvious. But anyways, I have quite a few questions, so we're gonna get into those. And was that in the book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
So this is often the case. I say this every time with children's books, especially, these kind of like picture stories that I have a feeling, obviously, the movie is an hour and almost 2 hours long. The book is 15 pages or whatever. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to ask, I pretty much know is not going to have come from the book. But sometimes there are some interesting surprises of what does or does not actually come from the book. So yeah, I have quite a few questions. Let's get into it. One of the things, the first questions I had, because we find out early on the farm that Ferdinand has his father is there. He's being raised on this bullfighting farm. And even that word farm sounds like not the right word. I don't know what else to call it.
I struggled with what to call it.
It is
the
a farm.
Whole time.
Like, I don't know,
a ranch.
Ranch, maybe, yeah.
I called it a bull factory sometimes in my notes because that seems to be what they're doing there is just raising bulls.
Yeah, it is. It's like, like in the same way, like a place that like, what is it called? Like, what is the place where you like raise like race horses? That's gotta.
I don't know.
It's gotta have a name.
I'm sure it's got a name. I don't know it though.
Apart from like a breeder, but like that's like the people or the organization that does it, not like the location. Whatever, doesn't matter. But on this bullfighting farm, he's there with his dad, and I wanted to know. They have this conversation early on, and we both had the same note. It's like, oh, this man's dead. His dad is dead as dead could be.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know if he has if his father like is in the book or whatever. If that story element comes from the book.
There's no mention of his dad in the book, although we do briefly meet his mom. Generally, I liked this change since Another Bull is obviously more closely related to the bullfight aspect of the story. I do kind of wish we could have had it both ways. I'm not sure it makes sense for the ranch to have calves but no cows. But I don't know anything about breeding prize fighting bulls, so maybe they do take the male calves away from the mother. I don't know.
It wouldn't surprise me if they do, like take them away and then send the cows to, or basically just breed them and then take the
babies away.
The babies to the bullfight. I would assume that would be how it would work, probably, but I have no idea, and I have no idea. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say we don't have any bullfighting breeder listeners.
You never know.
I mean, you never know, but I hope not. I don't know. We'll see, I guess. Okay. So no dad who dies in the bullfighting ring, but his mom. Does the story with his mom go anywhere? Or is she just like
she's just like a one-off character.
Okay. Great. So after he ends up realizing that he is not like the rest of the bulls. He is not a fighter. He realizes he needs to run away because he doesn't want to get killed in the ring or whatever. So he runs off, and I wanted to know if that's the same sort of plot element in the book. If he escapes the bullfighting farm, ends up on a delightful flower farm to be raised by a little girl and a nice family, is that come from the book?
No, it doesn't. He just lives on a farm with the other bulls and cows until he accidentally ends up getting carted off to the bullfights. There's no location change.
Okay.
This is another change that I liked, especially considering that his life at this ranch in the movie is set up differently than what we see in the book. In the book, it just seems like he's on a normal farm for the most part. I think it makes sense to have him leave and go elsewhere. And I think it also works to kind of keep you interested, like wondering how the story is going to curve back around to meet up with the book again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, I also really enjoyed the, we have like a desperate chase scene where he dives into a moving train car. I figured none of that would have come from the book. That all felt like very clear.
But he really jumped a train.
Yeah,
to get away from
absolutely
the bull factory.
And I will say I think it was a kind of a funny, like, clever idea to have the family farm that he ends up on. They just like raise and sell flowers.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
yeah,
talk about luck.
Yeah, it's
like
nice.
Heck of a coincidence. He ended up on the right farm. So as he's now gotten older with this family, they're going into town for the local flower festival or whatever. And they used to always bring him into town the last couple of years, but he's so big now that he's too big, and not everybody will understand that he's like a pacifist bull, and he'll be chill. So they aren't going to bring him into town. But he eventually decides, no, I'm going in anyways, and he goes into town. And in the center of town, he ends up getting stung by a bee, which sets him off to wreak havoc everywhere. And I want to know if that's sort of the inciting incident that causes him to be, and then in the movie, ultimately, this leads him being captured and taken back to the bullfighting farm. Now, obviously, he never went to the nice farm in the book, but is there a bee or any sort of incident like that sets him off and makes them realize or think that he would be like a good bullfighter or bull for bullfighting or whatever?
Yeah, that actually does happen in the book. He gets stung by a bee. It doesn't happen in the middle of town like it does in the movie. He's at home in the fields when the men show up to choose a bull, and the bee sting causes them to think that he'll be like the perfect fighter. I
mean, that makes sense. So there's at least one detail that actually came from the book, apart from like the general idea. A little scene that it sounds like probably not because he's in the field and not in town. Do we get, and I don't know when this idiom became a thing. I would imagine probably a long time ago, but the classic idiom, like a bull in a china shop. Of course, if you're making this movie, you have to include. I mean, obviously, and they do, and it's pretty fun. I thought it was one of the more fun scenes in the movie, honestly. And I wanted to know if the bull in the china shop scene is anything like from that in the book.
No, there's no bull in a china shop reference in the book, but I also did really enjoy that scene. I thought it was a lot of fun, very cute.
Yes, I agree. As he's taken back to Casa del Toro, where the farm he was initially raised on, when he gets back, there are some new members at this farm, including a calming goat named Lupe, played by Kate McKinnon. And I want to know if this character comes from the book. We discussed in the prequel that calming goats are a thing, but generally used for like horses.
Yeah.
And like in horse stables, basically, like race horses, and not necessarily anything to do with bulls, but anyways.
Horses, very nervous creatures.
Yes.
There's no goat in the book. This is a character that I had mixed feelings on. I thought it was a nice way to illustrate that the brutality of this world exists outside of just how the bulls are treated. But I also thought she was kind of obnoxious.
Yeah, I would agree. Overall, we'll get into it. I have a couple notes later, but overall, I thought this movie was not. It was a little obnoxious. It was not great in terms of like the humor.
It's not a top tier kids movie.
No, and I would agree that Lupe was one of those characters that was just like, oh god. All right.
It was a little bit like, can we not?
Yeah, like it's a fine idea, but just executed not great. Like the idea of like a common goat and like it being like it's kind of doing the they're kind of similar, playing a similar role at least initially to in Hercules, what's his name?
Phil. Yeah.
A little bit like she's like, I want to be your coach and blah blah blah, and like and I thought maybe they were kind of alluding to that with
that could be a little tongue-in-cheek reference.
I mean, I don't know, but anyways, overall the character it's a little obnoxious. It's like Kate McKinnon at her worst, and not her best. Which I don't even dislike Kate McKinnon generally, but she can be hit or miss for me depending on like what she's doing and you know like the kind of direction and writing and stuff she has and blah blah blah. So one of the other group of characters that we're introduced to when he arrives back on the farm that are new are these 3 little hedgehogs named Uno, Dos, and Cuatro, and they don't talk about what happened to Trace, which apparently we stopped this before we got to it, but I was reading in the credits, there's like an end scene where Trace shows up.
Oh my god!
And was alive the whole time, and I didn't read enough of the details to see exactly, but there apparently is like a mid-credit scene where Trace shows up. Anyways. Is there a band of hedgehogs played in the film by an interesting group of people? It was Gina Rodriguez, David Diggs, and somebody else. Can't remember who the third one was. But anyways, which I thought was interesting. But hedgehogs, we got any like quirky hedgehogs in the
No
book?
quirky hedgehogs in the book, and I feel a little bit similar about them as I did about the goat character. Not as bad as the goat was.
No.
And they make sense for the story that the movie is telling. But again, it's the kind of kids movie stuff that I find a little bit grating.
Yes. Yeah. No, I would agree. Yes. I absolutely agree. Which brings me to my next question. Do we have the obnoxious and prissy German horses? There are these 3 German horses that are also being raised on this farm.
For some reason. Yeah.
That are like, well, I guess it makes it because they're like part of the, like at the beginning of the bullfight, like they like do like the horses all come out.
Oh yeah, I guess
they're for that, I guess, but still seems a little strange. Whatever. They're on this farm, and they are these 3 German horses that are
very German.
Very German. I think the guy playing, I don't think any of the people playing them are German. Maybe one of them. One of the guys is like
they're doing
Finnish
like very
something.
over the top German accents.
Silly, like, yeah, exactly. Very over the top, silly German accents. I wanted to know if those characters come from the book.
They are not from the book.
Okay.
They had one line that I thought was funny that you wrote here.
It was my favorite line that they had, and it was one of the only like jokes I laughed at in the movie. That's my biggest complaint, is that I thought the movie just was not very funny.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, it just didn't do a lot for me humor wise. There was moments here and there, but like overall, it just kind of fell flat a lot for me. But there was this one I thought was good, where they're like making fun of Ferdinand and the other bulls, and one of them says the other one is like, I bet his parents aren't even related, which I thought was funny because they're like, they're like super, what's the word? Pedigree, maybe, like they're like super.
Yeah, they're super like
inbred horses because they just
they're so pedigreed and show horses and
they like breed them all from the same like lineage or whatever, and so they're all they just like they breed them with like their siblings and blah 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 constantly, or at least I assume that's what that joke made sense to me in that respect, because I was like, yeah, that seems reasonable. I don't know enough about how horse breeding works, but that seems like a thing that would happen. And that line I thought was very funny, but other than that,
that one line was funny. Overall, I hated the horse characters. I thought they were unnecessary and annoying, and I think that the book is better for the lack of horses.
They do take a prominent part in my least favorite part of the movie, but we'll talk about that later.
It was also my least favorite part of the movie.
It's oof. So during an escape attempt, as I mentioned during the summary, Ferdinand is sneaking through the house to get, I don't even know exactly why he's going through the house, but they're trying to get to the something to get out or something.
Yeah, it's like the only way out because there's like an electric fence.
Yeah,
I
guess they got to go through the garage to get out or something. So they're sneaking through the house, and he ends up in this trophy room, and he sees all these horns on the wall. And he sees one of the sets of horns he sees in this trophy room are his dad's horns. Mm-hmm. And he realizes in this moment that, his dad was killed, and that all of the bulls who have ever, gone to fight have been killed, and that they're not actually like, because of the myth that I think the movie doesn't do a great job setting this up.
Oh, I have thoughts on this. Yeah.
I don't think the movie does a fantastic job setting up like sort of the background story, but the idea that seems what is supposed to be getting across here is that the bulls exist in this sort of mythos that if they fight well and they can win, and then they'll like either come back to the farm or get celebrated and become like heroes. Yeah. Blah, they have this like myth about like they can win and become like champions and blah blah blah, when in reality just they all get killed because that's how it works. And he kind of realizes that in this moment. And I think it works okay. Again, I think the movie doesn't set it up quite perfectly, but I think it works okay. And I want to know if any of that came from the book.
No, none of that comes from the book. But here are all my thoughts.
Okay.
I liked that as a visual and as a plot beat, but the aspect of the story feels very weak to me. At the beginning of the movie, we're told that the bulls could win in the fight, and then when his dad doesn't come back, the assumption is that he lost.
Yeah.
So why?
Because we do have a moment later
Yes.
where he like sees the trailer come back.
Yeah, he sees the empty trailer.
And he's like, oh.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
assumption is that he's lost because he didn't come back.
Yeah.
So why would finding his horns be an indication that no bull ever wins? Further, that would mean that no bull has ever returned from a fight, so why do they all think that that's a possibility? I just have questions about the world
It
building.
is a little rough. It would make more sense if they thought that they like if they won, they went to like some special farm or something.
Yeah,
You know, like
they went to like the winner's farm.
They went to
or
the winner's
something.
farm or something, and that would make sense. And it would be really and like I guess the only idea is that then you lose the heartbreak of him thinking his dad's coming back. But
then he doesn't. But it's
but
very
it just muddies
mixed.
it in a way that doesn't exactly make sense. It would be very easy to fix it again, like you said. Just make it like they're and again it ties into like classic sort of this type of storytelling is like I'm trying to think of another example. There's some example that's popped in my head and I can't remember what it is, but that's a very classic like thing of like I think Snowpiercer did this maybe. Anyways, that classic thing of like the underclass, like the that this exploited sort of disenfranchised group is told, hey, there's a way you can have it all. All of your dreams can come true. You just gotta win. It sets up this like fake meritocracy.
Yeah.
Of like you can actually, if you're just a good enough fighter, you can fight your way out, and then you'll go live.
Yeah,
on this,
retire in style.
Retire in style and be the champion, and the whole country will adore you, and you'll be showered with praise and blah blah blah. And then you have the moment then and if you don't have any of the scene where he thinks his dad's coming back and then he doesn't, if you just get rid of that and just have him think that his dad's gonna go fight and maybe he'll win and he'll go to the farm and then one day I can do that or something, then the moment later where he finds all the horns and stuff works as that moment.
Yeah.
It works in that context because you're like, oh, okay, he didn't already know that his dad didn't come back. Like it works. Whereas as it is, again, it muddies it by having, and I think it's just because they wanted that
they wanted
both moments,
and they didn't make both of them work together.
Yeah.
It feels to me like somebody in the writer's room was like, it's just for a bunch of kids. They won't care.
That does feel a little bit like, okay, maybe, well, it's just one of those moments where it reminds us, like they set up the moment earlier and oh, he's sad. And then the second moment with the horns is like just a reminder or like kind of almost like, I agree that they probably thought, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
It definitely feels
kids.
a bit like a writer's room situation where somebody had different elements because you could see both of those ideas working in isolation. It's just putting them together doesn't really necessarily mesh in a way that makes sense. But again, when they got to that point, they're probably like, whatever.
Yeah.
Little kids aren't going to think about that. Who cares?
I think we should treat children with more respect than that.
Oh yeah, and who knows if that was their reasoning behind it, but that does seem not unlikely. So eventually they end up. We move forward quite a bit. We get to a point where Valiente is when he tells him about the broken horns or about the horn statues and that everybody or trophies and that all of the bulls die. Valiente doesn't believe him because he has bought into this myth about the. Being a champion or whatever and being able to win. And he doesn't believe him, so they get into a fight. And at the end of this fight, Valiente's horn gets broken and he gets sent off to the slaughterhouse. And I wanted to know if that is... And then because of that, Ferdinand, who doesn't want to fight, he's forced into it by Valiente here. The Matador sees this, and this is the reason that Ferdinand is chosen to go fight him, or he chooses Ferdinand to go fight him. And I want to know if that situation plays out the same. Because I thought that worked okay.
Yeah, it's not from the book, but I did like that scene. I think it works. In general, I liked that the movie gave Ferdinand like a specific enemy bull.
Yeah.
Like somebody, what the word I'm looking for is, somebody to like specifically be his antagonist.
Yeah.
While he's there on the ranch. rather than just having the enemy be like this nebulous,
Yeah.
oh, I might die kind of thing the
Yeah.
whole time.
Yeah. I will say this is so many story beats in this like this moment with this character. I think if this movie were handled by this, it goes back to a critique that I wrote later of just how sort of like bland and milquetoast this whole movie is that it feels like there's some really interesting things you could get into here.
Oh yeah.
Like you could, like, I'm imagining this done by a different filmmaker or different writers or whatever, where like you establish like, we're in a movie that is willing to like take more of a gamble and have more teeth and do more social critique. Like you could set up like a faction of bulls that are like kind of like diehard, like you could, and not that everything needs to turn into a critique of capitalism, but you could turn this in, or religion, but you could kind of turn this into that, where you have a sect of bulls or whatever who like full-heartedly buy into this myth that they've been sold about Valhalla, about Bull Valhalla. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're like so committed to it. And you can then use that to kind of tie in social commentary about religion, about the myth of meritocracy, about like all of these things. Feels like something that if the movie had wanted to do that, was right there to be done.
Yes.
And the movie just kind of decided, that's like, wait, we don't want to get it.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot of work. One, it's a lot of work. Two, it's like, it's for kids. Like, why? Who cares?
Yeah.
We don't need to get it. Like, but it could have been a really interesting examination of some of those where it would still work fine for kids. And it also then just creates more interesting characters if you have these like
more interesting
wild,
characters
over the
and
top,
a more interesting world.
Yes, and more interesting world. You have these wild, over the top like religious bull zealots who like, you know, or like, again, fully buy in. Kind of like imagining like the whatchamacallit boys from Mad Max or whatever.
Yeah.
From Fury Road, you know, who are like fully bought into this myth of and George Miller could have done this because he did Happy Feet. Like this actually, as I think about it, this actually seems like it would have been right in George Miller's wheelhouse. Critique capitalism, critique meritocracy, and all kinds of stuff.
Time for another movie. I want the George Miller version of Ferdinand.
I actually think that would have been really, really good. But because then you create, again, I think you could create a lot more interesting characters. You could create this world that feels much more, again, fleshed out and like interesting, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, well,
whereas we just kind of have like the extent of characters we get in this one is like, well, that's just a different looking bull who has a different accent. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like that's the extent of like the characterization.
The accents do a lot a lot of heavy lifting for the characters.
Because it's the only
this
characterization they really get for the most part. Like, like for the most part, like it's most of them are just like they're wacky in a different way. You know, like they're.
Well, and to add on to what you were saying about like, you know, building more interesting like characters and world and the social critique aspect of it, we talked about in the prequel about reading this story potentially as criticizing the gender construct that we have in our society. And I think you have here a really good opportunity to critique this kind of like buying into, because what we have in Valiente is a character who's bought into this myth of like being alpha. And like being the best. Yeah,
and it's couched in this and it's couched in the founding religion of this area he's from. You have so much there that like could tie directly in to like relevant social commentary. And again, you could do it where kids wouldn't even really notice, but the parents would be able to get something, you know, adults would be able to get something out of it in a way that this movie just doesn't provide any of. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Valiente as this sort of representation of toxic masculinity as a result of this founding myth and of both meritocracy, and you could even, if you wanted to, which I think that would even be fine on its own, just like the idea that you work hard enough, you want it enough, you rise to the top, and you're good enough, you will, you know, you go to the happy farm upstate when, oh no, you just get churned up and spit out like everybody else. Doesn't matter. Meritocracy is a myth. It's a lie. It doesn't exist. Like that's an interesting thing. And the movie, I think, again, kind of dances around that.
Yes.
It's there.
Yes, but the movie very much dances around that.
It seems very clear that the movie just doesn't want to offend anybody, like, It wants everybody to be able to watch it and not be like too like get anything too political or too thematically interesting out of it. It's just like, again, the extent of the message seems to be like, be true to yourself, which is like, okay, great.
Fine.
That's
There's
a fine message.
Freaking million
There's a
other
million
kids
things that
movies that do that.
And you have so much here. And again, it's there. And it almost feels like maybe there was fighting and like maybe some people wanted to push it more that direction, and then other people.
I have a lot of questions about that actually, and I referenced this a couple other times further in our notes. I feel like the first half of this movie feels different than the second half.
Oh, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, could be too. It definitely a little bit. Yeah. I still think it's even the first half doesn't really.
It doesn't have like the teeth that we're talking about, but it felt to me like the first half of the movie was planning to go a little more in on that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the second half is like a typical like schlocky, obnoxious.
It's just like chase scenes.
Yeah,
and
like pumped out kids movie.
Yeah. No, I would absolutely agree with that. Okay, so he does not. Valiente does not get sent to the slaughterhouse. And so I assume then if there's probably no slaughterhouse, there's no slaughterhouse rescue.
No,
anything.
there's not. I do have questions about how slaughterhouses work after this, because they go in and the bull that went there first, Guapo, was just like dangling.
Yeah.
And it's like nighttime and it's closed. And I'm like, why is he's like in a harness thing, just like dangling.
I don't know.
And I understand. I want to make it clear to everyone, I understand that I'm not the target audience of this film and it is in fact for children.
Yeah.
But this kind of stuff just really takes me out of the story.
And that's another one of those moments where it feels like they're trying to like kind of like do a little bit of like, ooh, the cruelty of animal slaughterhouses of animal farming and the way we treat animals, even beyond like, even if you're somebody who like is a meat eater and is like whatever, you could still be like, there are terrible ways to do that. We talked about it a little bit with the Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. There's even people who are meat eaters and are not vegetarians or whatever can be like have criticisms of the way the food processing or meat processing is handled and like how we treat animals and all that sort of stuff. And I think it feels like they're going again. This almost felt like a scene that was supposed to go somewhere with that, but then doesn't.
But then it's just like hijinks.
Yeah, and then it's just like hijinks. It's like, oh, he's dangling in the air. It's like,
ooh, now he's swinging around.
Okay, but why? Yeah, again, it's like maybe the idea was there's supposed to be some other scene where like we see him getting ready to be slaughtered and they haul him up, and then like the guy's getting ready to come over. I don't know how they kill animals like that, but like they put him in this thing, they haul him up, and they're getting ready to kill him, but then like something happens, and the guy leaves, and maybe they thought that scene was like too scary or too traumatic or something, so they cut it, and then we just end up with him. You know what I mean? Like, maybe there was a scene that was supposed to set this up and really like kind of drive home like the cruelty of like how again, what is the word? Factory farming. It was driving me crazy. I was like, why can I not remember that? I kept saying, that like how factory farming works and stuff. And it feels like maybe that's what they were gonna do. And then they were like, this is too much. Like, somebody said like, nah, we don't want to go that like dark.
Again. You know who would have the stones to do this?
Yeah, George Miller. I'm telling you, George Miller should have made this movie. As soon as I thought about it, I was like, that would actually be perfect. I think there's so many. Yeah, it would be great. And you get we got 2 car chases in this scene. They would have been fantastic. You kidding me? Yeah. Speaking of, is there any car chases in the book?
There are not.
Okay.
I have some thoughts on the action, like escape and chase scenes. I felt like they should have been interesting, but they were kind of lackluster. Like, I felt like the movie was doing everything to be like, look, this is exciting.
Yeah.
But it felt pretty formulaic to me.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Other than this one scene, which is my next question, is when after this big chase scene, they get to this train station, and they're like running through the train station. They're being chased, and there's like this train car that they all get up onto, and then Ferdinand is pushing it to like catch up to a train to couple it with it so they can get and run away. But he's got to push it to catch up with this train as it's driving, and they're all on top of it, and they're all being chased. And it was the only moment that felt like I was like, this is actually kind of clever, because it felt like a very realistic. I don't even know if realistic is the right word. The way it plays
believable.
out felt very believable, and like, oh yeah, like this is how this would happen.
Like I could buy that.
If animals were sentient and like were trying to escape on a train, this seems like a great way to, and it's like a perfectly plausible setup for why he gets left behind. You know what I mean? It's not like something weird where he like falls off or something weird happens. He's like, I'm the big one. I'll push all you guys to get it on to attach this car to the train. I thought that was like the one moment that felt like it actually worked in that regard.
Well, that's not from the book.
Yeah.
But I'll agree with you that I think that was a pretty good moment. I thought that was the best part of that entire like escape chase sequence. And to me, the difference is that scene actually built tension.
Yeah.
In a way that the others did not. Like the whole slaughterhouse scene, zero tension.
Well, do we even see any people?
No.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Well,
like,
maybe we're at the one
like
at the very end
or something.
But like the whole thing was just like hijinks. Like there was no tension. There was no like, oh my gosh, they might not make it.
Yeah.
But the scene with the train, lots of tension.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
good stuff.
I agree. And again, I wonder. It feels a little bit. It does. It feels like the movie was just defanged at some point.
Yes.
Like I feel like there was probably an earlier version of the script that had a lot more interesting stuff happening and was going to go harder in the paint on a lot of these like issues. We have slaughterhouses. We have, again, the myth of meritocracy. We have bullfighting. We have, I mean, obviously the whole overarching thing is about like animal husbandry and treatment of animals and all that sort of stuff. And then the meta, not meta, but like within the universe, the idea of like being true to yourself and pacifism and all. There's lots of stuff there. And again, the only real thematic through line that the movie commits to in any way is be yourself. Like, don't change to be what other people tell you to be, blah, 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 that kind of thing, which is like, again, fine. That's good. It's a good message. But like,
it's a great message. Do we need another piece of media?
If that's the only thing you're going to do
with that message.
Yeah. My final question is if Ferdinand is ultimately forced to fight in the bullfighting ring, the arena, does he confront a matador, and how does it play out similarly? Because like in the movie, he like accidentally ends up humiliating the matador, and like the matador, again, I thought this scene worked okay. There's this little moment where the matador, after he's like getting humiliated, he goes in and he gets like the little spear thingies, and he's like holding them up, chasing them around, and they like look like he's holding them up kind of like horns, and he's become the bull now, and like that sort of thing. And I thought that worked okay. And I wanted to know if any of that happened from the book, if any of that plays out similarly, and then ultimately is Ferdinand end up not, attacking or killing the matador, even though he could in the film. He sees the flower and it reminds him who he is, and he stops. It ends like Hellboy, actually. Right?
A little bit.
Yeah, he sees the crucifix and then
he realizes who he truly is.
He really realizes who he truly is, and he doesn't murder or doesn't,
bring about the
apocalypse. Yeah.
All right. So Ferdinand does end up in the bullfighting ring. But in the book, he just sits down and doesn't engage with the matador.
Stops seeing
at
red.
all.
Sorry. Hellboy, he's red. Anyways.
Which is basically what ends up happening in the movie. Like, he sits down and doesn't engage.
Okay.
But the book doesn't show him engaging with the matador at all.
Okay.
There's no flower in the ring, but he smells the flowers that, like, the ladies in the audience are wearing, and he sits down to enjoy the scent because he likes to smell flowers. I liked that the movie called back to the flower from the beginning, though, by having like the single red flower in the middle of the ring. I thought the movie's version of this maybe went on like a smidge too long.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
But generally, I preferred it. I liked the reference to like the bull and the bullfighter switching roles. And I liked that Ferdinand makes the conscious choice to not engage in violence, whereas the book just shows it as like his intrinsic nature.
Right.
He's like a dopey, gentle giant trope in the book, whereas the movie is like a little bit more deliberate about it.
Yeah, and a little bit more nuanced and realistic, is that even, the most pacifist non-fighty people, if somebody like stabs them, might be like you,
Yeah.
like for a second at least. But then he's able to. Yeah, I thought that scene worked overall pretty well, except for maybe how it ends. So does it end the same in the book where he's let? How does the ending?
Yeah.
play out?
Here, I'll read you exactly what the book says. He wouldn't fight and be fierce no matter what they did. He just sat and smelled. And the banderillas were mad, and the picadores were madder, and the matador was so mad he cried because he couldn't show off with his cape and sword. So they had to take Ferdinand home.
Oh, okay.
And for all I know, he is sitting there still under his favorite cork tree, just smelling the flowers quietly. He is very happy.
Okay. So the crowd doesn't spare him. Like, it's not like a big,
there's not like a
thing.
big spare him
It's just
moment.
like they're
They
like,
just,
oh, he won't fight, I guess. All right.
Send him home.
Yeah. Okay. Okie doke. All right, let's find out what Katie thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
Couple things. There's the specific tree, which he does sit under a specific tree in the movie. And in the book, it's a cork tree, which is an actual thing in real life.
Mm-hmm.
But the illustration in the book is very cute. It's kind of a visual pun, and it's a tree with like little wine corks growing off of it. So I wish we would have gotten a reference to that somehow.
I assume it's an actual, like it is like a cork tree in the movie, I would imagine.
Yeah, I
like,
don't know.
but,
I
like,
don't.
just
I don't know
they
what an
actually
actual
look
cork
like.
tree looks like. But it is a very cute illustration. The movie's dance-off scene.
Oh God.
Boy, I really hated this scene, and I don't know whose fault this kids movie trope is. But it feels right to me to blame the Shrek franchise.
It felt very Shrek.
It felt very Shrekky.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure kids loved it at the time, but it was the worst. It was terrible.
So bad.
It was so bad. It kept going, and it was just it's one of the things that aged the movie the most. It's anytime you do something like that, they're like break dancing and like it just feels hacky and dated. Yeah. Like months after the movie like comes out. Like I'm sure people watch
it probably felt dated by the time the movie premiered.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, it's like what is this was like a reference they're making in like Scary Movie 2. Like what you know what I mean? Like this kind of like jokey dance battles.
Yeah.
In like like referencing things like Step Up or whatever. Nobody likes that. What are you doing? Again, little kids, I'm sure, thought it was probably fun, but like, ugh.
My last thing here, I wish the movie would have called to the style of the illustrations in some way, because I think the illustrations in this book are quite lovely and unique.
And there's nothing that resembles that anywhere in the film. Well, that's disappointing. All right, let's find out what Katie thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
All right, so we talked about we've talked about a lot of stuff. I like that the movie goes in a little bit, like especially in those first scenes where all of the calves are talking about like the glory of bullfights and what happens when you win your fight. Just like these little babies with no idea how this actually works. And the book tells us that all the bulls want to be chosen to go fight the matador, but it kind of glosses over the fact that they clearly don't understand how bullfights work.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that the movie at least attempted to go into that a little bit.
Yeah.
There was a line that I liked that the dad says before he gets chosen to go fight the matador. Ferdinand is saying like, well, can I be a bull and not fight?
Yeah.
And the dad's like, I wish the world worked like that for you. I really do, but that's just not how it works for us.
Yeah.
Which again feels like something that was attempting or maybe meant to go in a little bit with some social commentary, but it just kind of didn't pan out.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like it particularly goes anywhere meaningful. But that is definitely a line that has some weight behind it in the light of the way that society constrains people
Yeah.
and forces them into boxes that they don't necessarily want to be in and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's definitely something there to it.
I did like that he got to go live on a flower farm. I specifically liked the addition of the little girl, Nina, and giving him like a friend.
I really thought that would have been
kindred spirit.
I will say that surprises me a lot that character isn't in the book at all.
Yeah.
Like that, I would have put money down of the things in the film that I thought came from the book. That would have been one of them for sure. Was like that character.
Very few humans in the book, really.
That's fair.
I liked that he ends up back kind of where he started and gets to reconfront his childhood bullies.
Mm-hmm.
Another line, I think Valiente says this, that I thought felt like the movie was intending to do some social commentary and then really didn't. He says, "You're either a fighter or you're meat."
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good line.
There was a quick visual call during the chase scene through Madrid to the running of the bulls that I thought was fun.
Yes. Yeah, I did know.
Yeah, where they're all like stampeding down a narrow street with like buildings up on either side.
Yeah.
And as obnoxious as I did find the goat character, I liked that at the end when they get to the flower farm and like Nina hugs her and she's like, "I love."
Yeah.
I thought that was very sweet.
Yeah, it was a cute little scene. Yeah. Yep. It didn't feel particularly earned to me because it didn't.
Yeah.
I don't feel like they set up her being like unloved enough. Like to me, at least.
Well, she says it a lot.
Does she?
She says it a lot. She says like, "Oh, nobody," or kind of like alludes to it, the idea that like nobody wants her around, but we don't really see that demonstrated.
I guess that's what it is. It just felt like it just kind of
we were told and not shown.
Yeah, I think maybe that's what it was. Yeah. All right, got a few things that the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
Okay, just a couple things here. The tree at the top of the hill that he sits under and smells flowers, straight out of the book. And there's also like a background that you can see in the movie with like a big stone bridge, like between two mountains or like a ravine or something. That's also, also from one of the illustrations. Ferdinand's growth chart. Like
during
measuring
the time
him.
Lapse or whatever. Or not time lapse, but the montage where they're like he's growing up or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the parade at the bullfight with all of the different guys who have like their spears and their like bayonets.
That's like the classic.
Yeah,
like,
very sharp pointy
I assume
sticks.
that's like actually what happens at the beginning of a bullfight.
I assume. I've never seen one.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would. I don't think I'd like it.
Would not go. No, are you kidding? Absolutely not.
All right, and that was what the movie nailed.
All right, let's get to our odds and ends before we hit the final verdict. I did think there was a moment kind of early on, and it wasn't perfect, but I thought it was at least an interesting thought, idea, is that we get this like moment where Valiente is kind of dreaming about like what it would be like to be like a champion bull or whatever.
He paints this fantasy sequence of being a champion bull.
And we kind of flash to like his imagination visually, and they did this kind of like treatment to it looks like the base animation, but then they like added a filter on it.
Yeah.
Like it's not the most perfectly executed, but it looks kind of cool where it looks and ends up looking like kind of like a painting,
Mm-hmm.
like it's almost like a fresco or something like that. And it looks kind of neat. I thought it was kind of
I thought it was neat.
I wish they would have used it again.
I know it gave me so much more like hope for this movie.
Yeah.
At the very beginning.
Yeah, it felt like
so I was like, oh, that's cool. We're doing interesting things, and then we didn't do very many more interesting things.
Yeah,
I was so when they capture Ferdinand in the village, I was kind of like, where is the dad in this scenario? Because I feel like couldn't he just be like, oh, that's our bull?
Well, I mean, I feel like
take him.
I feel like they would be like, yeah, we can. He just wrecked half the town.
I guess.
I feel like that's the answer.
But then it doesn't even
like,
try.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, and it could be like he doesn't. They'll be like, oh, that's your bull. You owe us $8 trillion for everything he broke. You know what I mean? Like, I could see that being like part of it. Like, He owes a lot of money now.
It just felt like there should have been a beat where he like tried to argue with somebody.
Yeah, yes, I wouldn't disagree there. It feels like he should have said something, but
It felt odd to me that beat was not there.
that's fair. I mentioned it earlier, but I think my biggest complaint with the movie, well, it is twofold. It's the one other part we talked about was just like the movie has no teeth, but no horns, whatever you want to say. But I think the other thing, and maybe arguably the bigger thing, is it just I think it was very funny. Like it didn't do much for me.
The thing is that it wasn't funny, but it was trying very, very hard to be funny.
Yeah, and maybe that's it.
Which is like a little bit unforgivable.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I think it's gonna sound like over the course of this that I think people will interpret that we like hated this movie, and I didn't hate.
I thought it was
movie.
fine.
I thought it was fine. Like I thought it was perfectly fine. Like I didn't hate it. I guess I hate the fact that it felt like it could have been so much more than it was.
Yeah.
Again, I think there was something there that it could have been a lot more interesting and just a lot better. But I didn't hate it. But
Yeah,
it
well,
just
it's like,
wasn't.
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah, because I guess that's the other thing. And I will say I think the other thing is it feels like. Well, we'll get to that in my last note in a second. We'll get to that in a second.
One of the hedgehogs, though, it made me laugh partway through because he was emo. He had like, this swoopy bangs covering one eye.
Yeah.
I was like, why is that hedgehog emo, and why are they not doing more with that? Because that is hilarious.
That would be funny. But yeah, they don't really do anything with it.
Also, during the car chase scene, it was a Pitbull song playing, and I was like, is this Mr. Worldwide? And I looked it up, and it was.
Of course it is.
It was Pitbull.
Yeah. And then the first song was one of the Jonas Brothers, I think.
Was it?
I think it was Nick Jonas was the first song, yeah.
What a soundtrack. No shade to either of those gentlemen.
I think Nick Jonas got nominated for an award for the first one, or for that whatever it was called. I can't remember the name of it now, but that first song that they play like through in total at the beginning of the movie, kind of. Yeah.
I think it's funny that like by the end of the movie, I was like, well, I guess this family is running a flower farm and a bull sanctuary now.
Yeah, for sure.
Just like 5 wayward bulls.
Yeah, they just like show up and he's like hanging out.
All right.
I guess we're doing that.
Okay.
And so, okay, we've talked at length at this point about sort of the fact that the movie just didn't have a lot to say ultimately, thematically, when it came to like criticizing things or commentary on anything. Really,
like it's not a problem necessarily.
No, again, that's not necessarily a problem.
It's not necessarily a problem, but I think it becomes a problem when you have so much there to work with,
and it seems like it's like,
and it
right
seems
there.
like it seems like, as we said, like an earlier draft of this perhaps was going to go a little more hard in the paint.
Yeah,
and then it somehow got defanged.
It either got defanged or just got lost in the wash. Like it just through rewrites and stuff. It just kind of lost some of the points it was trying to make because it. Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like your movie doesn't. I don't need every movie to be, like I said, I don't need every movie to be a critique of capitalism and meritocracy. I really, truly don't, even though it seems like it. Not at all. And I don't even need movies necessarily to have a political thematic, like big point. Like they don't have to be saying a lot for me to enjoy them. But it does feel like in this instance, there's a lot there. Mm-hmm. And the movie was like dancing around it and like thought maybe it was kind of saying something, but then like doesn't really stick the landing on anything in a way that feels it. And I think the big one to me that we hadn't really discussed was about bullfighting specifically. Mm-hmm. It just feels like the movie kind of ends on a note of like, live and let live, I guess. I don't like, we get no resolution on. So at the end of the movie, Ferdinand doesn't fight. He ends up, sitting down, and the whole crowd is like, "Oh, let him live," and he does, and he walks. El Primero walks away, and in the Wikipedia it says, "with his dignity" was the exact line. was how the Wikipedia synopsis wrote that. Again, who knows? It could have been a random Wikipedia person. and the crowd is like, yay, and they're like throwing him flowers and stuff, and we get like a happy ending. But it felt like the movie didn't want to confront bullfighting as a thing.
We don't resolve anything of like big picture.
No, it's just like, well, this one bull, okay, they like him, so he gets to leave. Are we still doing bullfights? Are we like, presumably yes. Like, we don't get a thing where they're like, oh, and that was the last bullfight that ever happened. You know what I mean? Like, there's no, it doesn't seem like the movie wants to go there. And I wonder if that part of that is they just didn't want to get mired in the like cultural debate about like.
Right. Well, and it's an issue too, because the movie sets up the idea that the whole institution is bad.
Yes.
But then it doesn't want to comment on that at the end of the day.
No. The crowd is not made to reflect, really. Like, they just like, it feels like they're kind of, that's what it is at the end when they're like, oh yes, don't kill him, spare him or whatever. Like, cause they're like, he's gonna kill him, and they're like, no, they're like upset, but it's like, I only get the vibe that they feel that way for this one bull. It doesn't feel
specific bull.
You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like they're like reflecting on the whole idea of bullfighting or like it just seems like the movie is like, it's just this one. It's that classic sort of generic problem with like vaguely liberal politics in movies, where movies like to vaguely liberal politics in movies like to criticize specific people in specific situations and not systems and not like overall power structures and stuff like that and everybody that takes part in systems and all that sort of stuff. It just goes, oh well, this one bullfighter was kind of an asshole and this one bull was really nice. And so they're sorted that out. Like, he didn't kill that bull, and everybody likes that bull and didn't want him killed, but we won't address at all the whole institution of bullfighting.
Like the classic like liberal movie about racism where like one black person and one white person become friends. So like racism solved. Exactly. Am I right, guys?
Exactly. It is exactly that, except with bullfighting, and it's like, wait a second, but like, there's still a lot. What are we doing? Okay, are they
just gonna bring in another bull after they let him go?
Unless there was a post-credit scene or a mid-credit scene that we didn't see. But like, you know, like, was there a scene that we missed where like, oh, Casa del Toro is like shuttered and they're closing down the bullfighting arena, and it's now because that would be the thing that would be like if this were like even had a little bit more teeth. You would cut like a few months later, they'd be living on the farm, and then you'd get like a cut in, or you do like a thing where you flash forward and like people are like lining into the bullfighting arena, and like you're like, oh, you know, and then it turns out it's like a concert or something, you know, they've repurposed the bullfighting arena to something else, and then we cut away, and you could even set it up where you still like, you think like it sets up like you think you're like seeing it's going to be another bullfight, but then it like kind of rug pull, oh, happy ending, and then we cut to the farm and they're on the farm and like blah blah blah. And even that, again, is not like it's saying a whole lot, but it's at least
saying a little
something
more.
Yeah, whereas this one, it literally just feels like they're like, we don't want to answer questions in the press junket about our feelings on bullfighting, so we're just going to be like, well, that one ended good. I guess, like, I don't. The end.
You know who would have the stones to answer questions about bullfighting in the press junket? George Miller.
George Miller would, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, the movie, it's a nice message.
Yeah.
But it's not transgressive or radical or
even
interesting.
Or even not even approaching that. Because, like, most, you know, like Pixar, Disney kids movies, most of them don't have particularly like transgressive, interested, you know, super like progressive messaging, but they do at least sometimes approach it to some extent, or at least try to, and again, often fail in certain different ways and different aspects and stuff like that. But it at least tries in some way, you know, like comparing this to, which has its own flaws, but comparing this to something like Zootopia, which at least like is trying to say something about like policing and like racial tensions, and it's been a while since I've seen that movie, but the last time I watched it, I was like, I feel like is this like really problematic. I don't know. I would have to rewatch it again, but I feel like that has its own issues. But at least it's trying to say something kind of interesting and like knows that what the story it's telling is like a political allegory that has to have some sort of like point of view, whereas this one it truly feels like they were doing, somebody was like, no, we can't have a point of view. The point of view is like nice bowl. That's the point of view. Ooh, what a nice bowl. The end. Like that's the extent of the point of view that this movie gets, and it's like, all right, I'm like, okay, I guess. All right, before we get to the final verdict, we wanted to remind you can do us a giant favor by heading over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us there for a few bucks a month, and at the $5 and up level, you get access to bonus content, including bonus episodes where we talk about stuff that's not based on books or sometimes comic books or whatever, like we just talked about Hellboy, and before that, we talked about Crimson Peak. And before that, we talked about something else that I can't remember.
We talked about School of Rock.
School of Rock. There you go. We have all kinds of episodes. Every month we put out one episode, bonus episode. The next one coming up is about Labyrinth. So there you go. If you want to hear what we have to say about those things, go give us $5 a month and you can listen to all that. You can also do us a giant favor by heading over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads. Follow us on all the social media platforms. Give us your feedback. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Ferdinand. Let us know if you maybe you liked it more than us. Maybe you thought it had more of a message than we're giving it credit for. We would love to know. Tell us. Comment, tweet at us, message us, whatever. Send us your thoughts and we'll read them and talk about them in the next prequel episode. It's time now for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
All right, so we've had a couple tough final verdicts in a row.
Yep.
Ferdinand is not really an exception. Does the movie do more with this story? Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
It fleshes out the plot. It adds some, at least semi-interesting characters. And it makes Ferdinand's pacifism feel like a more deliberate choice on his part than just like dopey nice bull. The rub for me with this film, aside from everything else we've already discussed, is that while I kind of enjoyed the first half, I was like, okay, this is all right, sure. I really did not care much for the second half. Once he got back to the Bull Ranch, the movie started to really take on more of the characteristics of modern kids' movies that I just find grating. Like goofy over-the-top characters, random dance numbers, and like low-hanging fruit physical comedy. Again, I get that I'm not the target audience, but at the same time, I know that it's possible to make kids' movies that still work for grown-ups.
Absolutely, yes.
Here's what it comes down to for me. The book is a classic. But I can't imagine that in 10 years anyone will remember this movie. It's fine, but it's not great. And to me, it feels largely forgettable for a lot of reasons. And for that, I'm giving this one to the book.
Yeah, I without having read the book, I would agree. This is to me feels like one of those instances where less is even more, because I think the fact that the movie or the book, doesn't expand the story to the extent that the film does, leaves a lot more of it up to like the reader to kind of get out of it what they want. Whereas this movie is like
reader
clearly,
response.
Yeah, this movie is clearly giving you kind of a more tailored, cultivated like sort of story. But again, it's a story that isn't really saying anything that interesting beyond even what the book. It's not saying anything more than the book is saying, but it's spending a lot more time and effort to do that, and it feels like that is not ideal. If you're gonna spend that much more time and effort, you should at least say something else, say something more, or add to it in some way that feels interesting. And I seems to me like the movie did not do that. So, Katie, what's next?
Up next, we have a big one.
Yes.
Something that I'm surprised we haven't gotten to yet. We will be talking about The Three Musketeers.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of film versions
Oh my
of
goodness,
this.
so many.
We will be talking about the 1993.
Okay, I think that I've
Film.
actually seen that one. I'm trying to look it up and see which one of these I've actually seen.
Yeah, this was Three Musketeers was a patron request, and initially that patron said, choose any film adaptation you like, and I said Barbie and the Three Musketeers it is then. And they were like, haha, how about the 1993 version? So
I
that's
have
what we're
seen
doing.
the 1993 one. I believe it's not good, but I remember liking it, I think, because the 1993 one, Charlie Sheen, Kiefer Sutherland, Chris O'Donnell, and Oliver Platt, which is
excellent, amazing.
Tim Curry, I believe, is the villain.
Love Tim Curry.
It's a heck of a cast. It has a 28% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Love that for us.
I have seen that one. I do remember watching that one. But I don't know which other ones, if any, I've seen. But anyways, I'm excited because I do remember liking that movie as a kid when I saw it when I was 5 or 6 or whatever when it came out.
Well, that probably means it's amazing.
I'm sure it's. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I like good movies when I'm a kid, and some of the movies I liked when I was a kid are terrible. So who knows? We'll see. But that's going to be in 2 weeks' time. In 1 week's time, we're talking about, we're learning things about Three Musketeers. We're talking about your thoughts and feelings on Ferdinand and all that good stuff. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else,
Keep reading books
keep watching movies
and keep being awesome.